Welcome to the Property Experts podcast by Fantastic Services, where we interview leading landlords, property developers and investors, architects and interior designers. Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Fantastic Services Property Expert podcast. I'm really excited today. As most of you know, who's been following our podcast for a while, know that we're very interested in sustainability and the future of building. And I happen to be joined by Graham Ford from Graham Ford Architects. And today we're talking about a very specific thing that's very close to my heart, is designing for sustainability. This is not about how you improve your home. It can be. We'll see what Graham comes up with and how much knowledge he has. But Graham has a number of projects he's done, amongst the others, the Hyde Park Pavilion and a few other things. So it's a really exciting time to talk to Graham, but also when we're expanding and when now, if you're thinking about new build, this is a very good podcast. Remember, subscribe to the Fantastic Services Property Expert podcast. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, and any other channel. It's on the Property Expert podcast. And a warm welcome, Graham. Thank you so much for sparing your time and joining the Fantastic Services Property podcast.
Thanks, Rune. Yeah, I'm very happy to be here.
Graham, like everybody else that comes on the podcast, I ask them one particular question. Right? It's like, how did you get into property?
So I got into property because I was interested in designing. So at school, I was really good at drawing and reasonably good at maths and quite a good all-rounder. So that kind of was a perfect sort of bunch of skills for being an architect. I like drawing. I could do maths. I could write. So that's how I got into property, is really through my sort of skill base from school.
Well, it's one of the things. I love property design, but my drawing skills are limited, which is, I think, is one of the main things in architecture, right? In design. Graham, tell me a little bit about your background and some of the projects you worked on, because I think what you're working on now and also what you're doing on Sports Club and a number of other things is really interesting.
So that's great. So we design houses, but we also design sports buildings. So we've got two specializations. One, renovation of buildings. So I renovated the Roundhouse in Camden Town, and the other is sports buildings. So we worked on the London 2012 Olympic Games, and through that experience, we learned how to design sports buildings. So we've done a number of pavilions for sport. So there are two kind of areas of specialization.
They're also interesting because they're not for living in, but they're for functional. And it's one of those things that, like, if you build something for function in that way, it's like it has to also be aesthetically good. But it also, in some cases, a lot of sustainability goes into this. So tell me a little bit about what you think is happening on sustainability and now about designing for sustainability. What are some of the things we can do?
Yeah, so in terms of the big thing that's happening in sustainability is off-site manufacture. So when we designed the Hyde Park Boathouse, all the frames and all the timber panels that we worked on were hold on, let me just see if I can get that.
If you can see it. It's a very beautiful building. Let's see if we can get it. Right, for those guys who are listening, we're just trying to bring a picture up. But this should be, it's on our YouTube channel.
I can't get that to work at the moment. But when we designed the building, we designed it with a series of frames that were built in a factory. So it was built off-site, and all the timber panels were built off-site. So that meant that everything was extremely efficient, and there were less materials used. And then on-site in the middle of Hyde Park, it was put together very quickly. So it had a very low impact on the existing site. It was put together very fast, and it can also be demounted. So because it's a kit set and it's a number of frames and panels that are the same size, it can be taken down and taken away. So in that way, it's very sustainable and it's easy to adapt and very fast to put up. So that's the big thing that's happening in architecture and sustainability, is being able to build buildings fast and in factories. And as much off-site manufacture as you possibly can. that's the new innovation. That's the new thing that's happening.
So and that brings in sustainability, because the factories, you don't have to bring all the equipment out there, and the factories can be streamlined on doing that part of the process, which of course becomes more efficient. Then there's a transport issue, but that's a lot less than the impact it has on the local environment when you're building, because you're going to have to bring everything in there, and everything is on site, but also the number of materials. I mean, what I hear is timber is more usable now than it was before with concrete. We all know concrete isn't necessarily the most sustainable thing in the world. It could be very, very long lasting, but it's not necessarily the most sustainable thing in the world, and especially the production of it during the time. So when you're looking at a new site, and you're looking at this and prefab, like, how do you get into that in design wise?
Yeah, so actually, the first thing you do when you design a new building is you think about the orientation, and you get the building orientated the right way. If you're going to use prefabrication, you've got to have an idea of how that's going to work right at the very beginning. So if you're going to use prefab, you've got to set it all out based on standard modules right from the word go. Orientate the building the right way, and then you can use prefabrication very successfully. But it's about thinking about prefabrication as a solution right from the very beginning of the project. You can't sort of decide to do prefabrication later on. It has to be there right at the beginning.
Yeah, but you talk about this stuff here. Let's talk about the sustainability part, because you talk a lot about location and what, not on top of the location, but also orientation.
Yeah.
Right. And we went through this before, so like I'd love you to go into depth with what it means, how much different it means on light and warmth and so forth, because that's where I think a lot of us would maybe go for the view or something else when we're building and designing, but there's a lot more to think about than just the view.
Yeah, so I think what you've got to do when you're designing the building, you want to design it so that the winter sun, which is lower in the sky, actually goes through the windows and warms up the concrete slab. So if you have an exposed concrete slab, for example, or exposed tiles, they can heat up with the winter sun. But what you want to do is cut out the hot summer sun, so especially the sun that's tracking around to the west. So sort of midday to sort of 3 to 4 o'clock in the summer, you want to screen that sun out with the roof or with louvers and screens. So I think the key idea is make use of the winter sun, allow that into the building to warm the building up, especially if it's a house, but screen out the high, hot summer sun, especially the sun that's going around to the west.
Mm. And there's a lot of things on that one, because the screening out the summer sun, there's also, you can put heat sinks sort of out there. You can take elements that sucks in the heat but doesn't bring it into the building in the summer. And that's where the concrete slab acts as almost a storage battery for heat.
That's right. Yeah. So basically what you want to do is you want to have elements in the building that are heavy. For example, a concrete slab is a good example, but you could have a solid wall that gets a lot of sun that stores the heat, and then later on in the day it releases the heat. So sort of during the evening it releases that heat and warms the building up. So I think those key principles are fundamental to sustainable design.
And what does that mean for the owner? I mean, when you're living there, does it mean that one part of the house is super cold, the other one is warm, or is it a more of a different way? And what does it mean in savings, for example?
Yeah, so I think if you've got a well-insulated house and you've got it orientated the right way, you've got screens to keep out the hot summer sun, that reduces your energy in summer because you're spending less energy cooling the building. And it also reduces your energy in winter, because if you're letting the lower winter sun into the building that's hitting these heat stores like the concrete slab, then you're reducing your energy bills in winter as well. So you're reducing your cooling bills in summer and you're reducing your heating bills in winter. So all round it should save you money.
And it's not just that. I mean, it's always like when you get lights in the winter, it's incredible. I mean, the even for yourself, I come from an area where it's dark, quite a lot, during the winter.
Totally. So there's a huge sort of psychological aspect to it, sort of well-being and I think if your house isn't dark and damp, and if it's full of light, and you're going to feel better, and you're going to have a healthier house.
And this is where I'm interested in it, like, because it's a big dream of mine to build a really nice home one day, and do the rest of it. A really big dream of mine, and then get it properly designed and architectural stuff. How much is the difference between that and, let's say, like a type house that you're going out and buying? I mean, it depends. I guess it's like asking how long is a piece of string, but
Yeah.
still. Like what's the process? You go to an architect, you go.
Yeah, so if you want to design a house for yourself to sort of meet your particular lifestyle and the way your family lives, you first, the process is you write a brief. So you write all your ideas down on a brief. You take the brief to the architect. So you sort of say, I want, the brief can be what your vision is, what you want, how many, and then it can be practical as well, how many rooms you want. And what your criteria are for the house, how sustainable you want it, what sort of relationship it should have with the outside. And then the architect sort of takes that brief and works with that brief and starts designing the building once the brief's been discussed. So the key initial stage is the brief. And then the architect responds to the brief, or the architect will help you develop that brief and help you write it as well. And then you start designing once the architect fully understands what you want to do. So I think that's the key first stage. And a lot of people don't do that. A lot of people don't write the brief, and a lot of architects aren't good at taking the brief from the client and developing it. So that's what we do. That's the very first stage. Once that happens, then we start mapping out how the building might sit on the site. So we go with the client to the site, and we look at the site together, and the client usually has a really good understanding of the site because they've lived there, or they know it from they've been going there for a long time. So the architect will interpret the site with the client. The client will provide a lot of valuable information to the architect, and the architect will use that when they start designing the building. So the architect has to respond to the brief and then respond to the site with their first designs.
And I guess that's a really important part of it, because also that's where you come in on the understanding of the light and understanding of where it comes from. Yeah. Besides the sunlight, what else is there of sustainable things? I mean, one is the other one is the positioning of the building, or the orientation.
Yeah.
The second is the materials used, whether it's concrete slab and wood. What else is there on sustainability?
Yeah, so the key things are the light, ventilation. So you might orientate the building for wind, so that in the summer you get cross ventilation through the building, and that helps a lot to sort of reduce costs. And then the other things are embodied carbon. Embodied carbon is sort of the amount of carbon that's used to manufacture and assemble the building. So all the materials that you use all have embodied carbon. So the embodied carbon's important, and then the amount of the performance of the building. So how well it's insulated, what kind of insulation you use, and how much energy you use to heat and cool the building, and that will be determined by all these other, the amount of energy you use the amount of energy you use to heat and cool the building will be determined by orientation and by the quality of the insulation and how much insulation you have, and how much sunlight you're storing in the building as well, how much energy you're storing through your heat stores. So all these factors are the key things in sustainability.
And on insulation, which is one of my favorites. I mean, growing up in a dark country, dark and cold country for the winter, where I was surprised about not seeing double glazing, for example, in the UK. You could imagine a single house without double glazing in Denmark. And I think in Scotland they're also using more double glazing. What's the most important part of the insulation? Is it the roof? Is it the windows? Is it the walls? Is it the
So I would say the weak part are the windows. So sort of where the window's attached to the wall, and actually the windows themselves, a lot of energy is leaked through the windows. So actually, yeah, you're absolutely spot on. It's the windows that are the weak link, because the walls usually have a very good performance. They usually perform really well, but it's the windows, if they're not double or triple glazed, or if they have poor seals, if they have poor seals, or if they're not double glazed or triple glazed, then that's where all the energy leaks out from. So the roof and the walls are usually, if you get the right insulation, they usually perform well, but it's the windows that's
There's a big energy drain from the windows, either one way or also for heat, right?
Totally.
So it comes both ways.
Yeah, totally.
And then there's, the technology in Windows is also constantly developing, right? Now there's heat reflecting, and then there's different kind of gases they use inside the windows now. So it doesn't have to be, this thick or 10 centimeters thick to actually have the right effect, but the different gases they're using, the different.
That's right. No, absolutely. So high performing windows make a big difference. Absolutely. So yeah.
No, I remember I installed a double glazing on the inside of a pair of sash windows, and I didn't have to put power on ever. I never had to put the energy on. It was so simple. It was like, okay. And the best thing was it also blocked out the noise. It was a central London flat, just inside, bam, double glazing on the inside. Didn't change anything on the outside of the building. Okay, yeah, it took a little bit of space, but I never had to turn on the heating again.
Yeah, wow, that's great. That's great.
And it wasn't even that expensive. I think it was like £800 for two, and it was perfect. So
you get payback from that really quickly. Actually, you'll get you'll get a lot of payback on that. It might take you a couple of years. I mean, I think the other thing about sustainability is energy, sort of energy generation on site. So if you can use photovoltaic panels, or if you can use evacuated tubes for solar thermal energy, that can make a big difference as well. So you can sort of if your building can start to generate energy on site, you could end up having a building that actually exports energy to the grid. That's going to be the dream. That's where we've all got to head, is to actually have a building with enough renewable energies integrated with the design that you can export energy to the grid. So that's where that's the big dream. That's what we want to. That's where we want to go in the future.
And my question to you, because you're getting the clients coming in, it's like, how many of your clients are now asking for this? How many clients are asking for going in that direction?
Yeah, so most so in London, probably 70% of our work's renovation. And 30% of it's new build. So the renovation projects are inherently quite sustainable, because we're reusing the existing fabric. So they all have a very low embodied energy. Because we're reusing them, they are very sustainable. Now the new build of that 30%, probably only still only about 10% of those clients are asking for a really sustainable building. But every year it's slowly increasing. So we're finding that more and more people are, but it's still not a huge percentage.
And is that what do you think the reason for that is? Because that's a fascinating thing to me. Is like, is it because of a fear of cost? I mean,
that's exactly what it is. So people sort of are afraid that it makes the design really complicated and makes the build really complicated. But I think if you get the right team working with you, it doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be expensive. It can be quite. It can be managed so that it doesn't cost you a fortune. And I think the management of the process is absolutely key, so that it's something that is very easy to integrate. So I think more and more people are wanting it, and it's going to become mainstream. It's a bit like an electric car. In 10 years' time, everyone will drive an electric car, and in 10 years' time, everyone will have a house that is sustainable, or maybe not 10 years' time, but maybe say 15, 20 years' time, everybody will have a house that, if it's a new build, it'll export energy to the grid.
Yeah, no, because right now we're starting with boilers. 2025 boilers, the way we know them, the gas heated ones are out. I mean, I didn't understand it because we had central heating. So it's like, what do you mean that you have to heat up your stuff at home? I didn't understand that when I moved to Britain the first time. It's like, what do you mean? It's like heating is done in some factory out there that's burning whatever or coming from somewhere, and it's like that's the hot water going through pipes and steam through the. I didn't understand it. I said, like, what you mean? I have to burn something inside. I was like, I hope my son will ask me one day. It's like, so you meant your cars had a real engine that burned stuff inside it, right? That's what my hope is, that somebody's going to ask me that. It's like, you meant your cars back then burned something inside it, right? And I think it's the same with houses. But I'm a little bit like you said, it's 10% now. And we talked about, is the price that much of a difference then? Is it more in the management of it? Because my view is that it's not necessarily the materials, it's more in the actual knowledge, like what you have. Greg.
Yeah, it's in the knowledge. So actually that's right. So you can get about 80% towards a sustainable building by just getting the orientation and the design right. Now, that doesn't cost you any more money. If you to orientate the building is just design time. And to design the building so it screens out that hot summer sun but lets in winter sun. Again, it's just design power, design know-how. So that gets you 80% there. Now the last 20% is the materials. Now the materials, using a sustainable insulation versus using a non-sustainable insulation isn't a dramatic difference in cost. And then it just comes to the cost of photovoltaic panels or solar thermal. So again, that's something that you could decide to spend that money, and you'll have a 7-year payback time on that. So you might decide to invest in that, and in 7 years' time you've paid that off.
But I think that's really interesting what you said. So it's actually not more expensive. It just requires a different skill set, knowledge, planning it from the beginning, not just the planning the prefab, but planning from the beginning when you're on a greenfield site now. So that's why I said, like, I'd hope, like 80% of new greenfield sites, the guys like, listen, it's got to be sustainable, period. And we've had this discussion on the podcast before with a couple of others, and we're saying, should government do more to encourage this? Or is it us who should do more in talking about it, and not just talking about it, but like making the orders, like what we're doing in Fantastic of changing our cars and changing the way the fleet management is run and so forth. Should the government have more impact on that, or?
Yeah, I think they should. I think government sort of should. Well, they are already. That they through the building regulations, there has been a big improvement in energy conservation. So they have played a role in helping steer the whole industry in the right direction. But I think we need leadership from the government to actually really kind of accelerate this. So absolutely, it should come from government, and government should. But they should. I mean, I think that they've got to put the policies in place. And climate change, I mean, obviously it's a major issue all around the world. So I think government, yes, definitely should take a lead and show leadership in this sector. Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely, but it's like we're going back again because it baffles me a little bit. It's like, so it's actually not meant more expensive. Yes, there are a couple of insulation materials, and of course, the price of windows is a whole different ballgame. But also the quality that you buy when you buy the right windows and the frames of this stuff, it's a huge difference. Like, to me, it's one of the biggest things. The first thing I look at it built is what kind of windows are in there. Have they actually invested, or are they just put in there for the sake of it? For me, a window isn't just a glass; it's a part of the wall, but it's bringing in the light. But first, planning, right? Planning the orientation. Second one was like about heat storage, the materials used inside the right way. The third one is about the let's say the materials used in storage, whether the wall is placed there, especially with the wind. And the fourth one, very simple, is like it can be heat pumps, it can be solar panels, it could be light panels that generates this stuff here, and that can be added on later. The other three things you can't really change the orientation later. So that's why I was like, any new build, it's a shame now hearing that it's not the first thing to think about. Like, how do I locate and orient this building to become sustainable? And that's maybe a warning or a sign of like, we should be saying this more about it starts with the right orientation. Like,
no, that's right. I mean, I think a good designer will plan the house so that different parts of the house get sun at different times of the day as well. So obviously the way the house is laid out and the way that you get light into the house, you might want certain parts of the house to get sun in the morning, and then you want certain parts of the house to get sun in the afternoon, and then on top of that you want to screen out the hot summer sun and let in the winter sun. So the whole, and then you want to get the wind blowing through the house at the right time, and you want to orientate it, the gardens and all the landscape around the house, so that certain winds might be a barrier to certain winds. But then again, you might want to let certain winds blow through in the summer. The wind direction is going to change from summer to winter. The prevailing wind is going to be different at different times of the year. So all of these different factors are sort of like a matrix of different things that you consider when you design the house. And that's the know-how of the designer. That's the beauty of design, is that it doesn't cost any more. You just have to spend some time planning it at the beginning to get it right.
I guess that's where the math comes in as well, right, Graham?
Yeah, well, there's a little bit of math just in sort of analysing the sun angles, for example. So we always sort of we make sure we get the sun angles at different times of the year, just so that we know that in the middle of summer and in the middle of winter, we know exactly what the sun angles are on different parts of the house. So yeah, there's a bit, but the computer can help you with that as well. Yeah.
But still, it's the understanding of that it's a moving thing. We're on a planet that moves, and we got to sustain it. Graham, what do you think the future will hold in this one here? Like, will we see this? As I said, you said 10, 15 years. I hate to predict the 10, 5, 3. It's like I would have thought we were all driving electrical cars now, but maybe that's my anticipation of it. Maybe it takes longer, but if you were starting out now, like if somebody was coming in and said, like, I want to build this stuff, would you actually try and push them towards the sustainable look at it? Or
I think that we would automatically design them a sustainable house anyway. And I think, and as I said, 80% of it's going to be the design and the orientation. Now, the last 20% of it, the materials, how much insulation they want to put in, the client has to be on board with that. So they're going to get a sustainable house from us anyway. And the last 20% is going to be driven by the client, because the client has to be on board. You can't sort of push a client. You can't push them in a certain direction if they don't want to go. So we work with the client, and we hope that our practice does attract people that want to do this sort of work. And some people are really willing to do it, and other people are a little bit more, and it comes down to budget too. So if the budget's really tight, then we have to work with the clients and make sure that we can build it to their budget. So budget constraints will come into it. But look, as I say, if they come to us, they're going to get a house that's pretty sustainable. And if you're looking at a gradient, if we can get a house that eventually exports energy to the grid, and they've got the budget to do that, then that's great. But we work with everybody, and everybody has different constraints.
But just still starting out, you're absolutely right on this stuff. I said, like, it also depends on what the reason for the build is, right? There's a number of things that goes on before the thing. Is like, is it built for a resale? I mean, like, are you looking to build this for 7 years? Are you looking to build to flip in 5, 3? Are you looking to do this stuff here to sell? What I've seen when I've interviewed others in the Property Experts podcast is that there's a small but growing number of discerning clients who will be asking. And not only that, the energy efficiency report on housing has also meant something in that people are asking this. And I've seen a couple of examples where actually listings where it says this is a sustainable house could increase the sale, not just the price, but also the speed of sale, that people took that step. So as I said, like those are also things to bear in mind. That is slowly coming in, and it's like the difficulty of buying a diesel car right now, right? It's like you can't make that purchase, right? It's like, okay, well, they're producing them, but if I'm to buy new, it's not going to be a diesel. I don't know if I can sell it again, right?
100%. And as energy gets more expensive, and as energy gets more scarce, it's going to be like the diesel car. The energy, the house that sort of consumes enormous amounts of energy, nobody's going to want to buy it. Yeah. So the more efficient the house is, the less money people are going to have to spend, the more valuable that sort of asset's going to be. So it's definitely a change. It's definitely a change going on in the industry, and in society in general. People are going to start demanding it more and more. There's no doubt about it, and it's going to be a more valuable product. The more sustainable it is, the more valuable it's going to be, for sure. It's just a question of how quickly is that going to happen.
No, and it's one of the things is like I always said, like you can't slap a green tax on it. Like, oh, it's organic now; it's 10% more, 20% or 30% more. It's like you can't slap a tax on it. I don't think it should be a tax. It should more be like we're trying to do this. We're going to do it better, and if the cost is there, the cost is there. But it's not an extra tax of I can charge more for it because so and so. And I really like what you described. It's not the materials to start with. Actually, it starts with the orientation of the house, and that's completely new for me. That's a good lesson here today. And I was like, well, hold on. So my initial vision of a site now when I go and see it is like, hold on. It's like that. I might have to start seeing that differently than I looked at the site before. Because like, hold on, I knew that would be a massive south-facing window because that's the great view, but that's not actually going to be the one unless it's got the heat grill and this stuff here. So there's certain things you actually don't want the sun in the summer. In the winter, you'd want it, but that can be done with heat grills. That can be done with a number of things on top of it. But there are also. We talked about a little bit, we touched it about refurbishments, right? Because, one of the things that I say in Fantastic Services is repair, maintain, clean, repair, maintain is probably by default the most sustainable thing there is, right? Like keeping the building, but improving what you have.
Yeah,
like, one of my dreams would be to just take the engine out of my car and replace it with an electric one tomorrow if I could. Right? That's one of my dreams. Like, why haven't you done a swappable motor and bam, it's gone? That business idea, guys. But on the house, when you're talking about a refurb, I think that's a fascinating one as well. That can actually improve the current house, even if you're building an extension. That can actually improve the current house energy efficiency as well in that refurb. And how would you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's inherently sustainable because you're not knocking something down. You're reusing what's there. So the embodied energy, you're saving on embodied energy there. You're not having to rebuild from scratch. So that automatically is sustainable. Then by refurbishing, you can improve the performance of the walls by adding insulation on the inside, or you can actually add insulation on the outside, depending on the house. You can do it both ways. It just depends on heritage issues. In some heritage environments, you can't put the insulation on the outside, but if it's not a heritage, if it's not a conservation area, you might actually even be able to put the insulation on the outside. So and then render over the top. So. Look, there's a lot of scope for design and imagination with renovation, and it's and actually you can get some pretty exciting results by reusing old buildings and then inserting new things into them, sympathetically. It can be you can get very spectacular results, and again, London's a place where there's the building stock's constantly getting reused and renovated. The old Georgian houses, the old Victorian houses, they're constantly being, reused, and partitions moved around and walls knocked out. So again, it's they're very adaptable, those old houses. Basically there's just a party wall on each side, and then in between the party walls you can just basically, move things around, and that's what people do, and they're very sustainable. Just the Georgian houses have been there forever, and we're still renovating them. So there's lots of scope for innovation, actually. And
I think there's more and more technology coming out. I mean, there's more and more materials. There's more and more materials, but there's also better understanding of what to do with it. And I think that's really refreshing to hear, and also like in a renovation project. But again, I will ask you the same question as I did before. Like when they're coming new build, like what's the are the consumers or the buyers, are they asking for that now? I think when they're looking at a refurb, when a redesign or something else of a property, are they asking for that more than they are for the new build? Because that's what I'm hearing, like especially around double glazing on the inside, if you can't do for planning and so forth. I mean, so it's extremely affordable, some of those things, like cavity wall insulation, like adding that in. It was just there's so much stuff you can do. You can add an extra layer, you can add 3-6 millimeters on top, and it makes a huge difference on the cladding you put inside on the wallpaper even, and it's like, whoa, it's a completely different house. The quality.
Totally. And people want to save money. People don't want to be spending a fortune on energy bills. They want to save money, so they want to renovate their house, and then they want to have energy bills that are lower than what they had before. So, look, it's about saving money. It's about saving the planet at the same time. So that's what you want to do: save money and save the planet. So absolutely. I mean, people are demanding better insulation, and they want to refurbish, they want to reuse their house. I mean, especially in London with the cost of moving, people want to build up if they can, build to the side, build to the back, and build underneath. So you've got to be able to do all of those things for your clients. You've got to know how to do them all, and you've got to know how to get it through the planning system. So one of the big things that clients face is actually getting their project through the planning system in conservation areas in particular. It's very challenging in London, and that's where you need specialist expertise and advice. That's where the architect really comes in, is in two environments. One, where you're designing a pavilion or a new build in a park or a conservate, or in a green belt, say in the green belt or in a park. So, for example, we've done 2 pavilions, one in the Lee Valley Regional Park and one in Hyde Park. So those sort of places you need specialist planning expertise, but also in conservation areas you need specialist planning expertise as well, just to get it through the planning system. So that's the big sort of challenge that clients have, particularly in London, but in any metropolitan area, really, any big city.
Well, and also on greenfield sites. I mean, I think one of the things that is like, I'm always for maintaining things and maintaining a certain charm. I mean, of course, there was a couple of years where everything was built so fast that that no thought of color or scheme or anything else was thought of, and those things. And then there are that charm of buildings as well to keep it on, but also the idea of nature. I mean, the more I see it, is like now people are trying more and harder to build interesting building in new areas, but also really thinking about it. But Graham, I mean, I have to thank you so much for spending your time on this. And it's like, and in summary, I mean, like you said, 80% of it is about the orientation and the planning of it, and then a little bit about the materials, and then of course the cost on the materials and what you're using, but they're also coming down. So that was really refreshing for me, because I would thought it was all about the materials, but you're actually saying that the orientation is more important in that aspect of it. And I think you're right, because we've got the biggest energy source out there. It's called the sun, right? It is the biggest energy source we have. It's bigger than anything we can heat up, right? So it does have that effect on housing. So of course it's obvious that if that is stored during the day, then and we're not talking about solar panels. We're talking about actually how it stores into the concrete or into the walls or bricks or however it's stored, so that isn't so much on the materials, but the actual location of it, so that it does come in, it does hit it, and then it does it. It makes perfect sense now. You just opened my eyes into seeing this. So thank you so much for that, Graham.
That's all right. That's great.
Graham, how do people find out more about you, and how do they get in touch if they're interested?
Yeah, so if they go onto our website, so www.grahamfordarchitects.com. If they type into Google Graham Ford Architects, they'll find us, and then there's a form there, a contact form. They just click the contact form and send us a message. We're happy to have a chat over the phone and find out what they want to do.
No, it's exciting, Graham, and I wish you all the luck with it and enjoyment of it, because I think it is an exciting time, and I think it's an exciting time to think differently. So thank you so much for your time. Again, thank you everybody for listening. It's the Property Experts podcast from Fantastic Services, and we had Graham Ford from Graham Ford Architects in there today, talking about designing for sustainability, but also really enlightened me on the number of things that can be done with a refurb. So thank you so much for your time, and I'll speak to you soon.
Great. Thanks for having me.